You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Joining us now to help break down these last couple of weeks of session is Republican Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with the Gombe report that came out just this week, basically affirming what we already knew, the governor's budget proposal from February, essentially short $500 million, a pretty big total to be wrong on for that deficit. Now everybody's at the drawing board trying to figure out what this budget is going to look like, where the cuts are going to come from. There's a lot of murmuring about if revenue is going to be the game plan here going forward as well. I want to get your opening thoughts on just where we're at right now, middle of May, for the budget with just a couple of weeks left.
Yeah, we've got, and let's keep in mind that the budget, the proposed budget was still increasing by over $2 billion. So we have $500 million less than that. So it's still going to go up $1.5 billion, which is insane. You know, over the last 6-7 years since Governor Pritzker's been in office, our budget has increased by $15 billion from 40 billion. So, you know, there are ways to get back to a sense of reality. You know, we've kind of been a bunch of kids in a candy store for the past 6-7 years with all the COVID money that's come in and all those different dollars. And now it's time to be adults and kind of tighten our belt a little bit and see what we need to do. I would obviously say that the healthcare programs for illegal immigrants are the first place that we should cut, especially looking at proposals that are coming from the federal government that might affect our Medicaid match for our current citizens.
So yeah, to go off of that, the governor's proposal already accounted for half of that program being cut. The 42 and to 64-year-olds, that program was already going to be cut. Still needs $500 million additional more.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wait and see game on what happens to the immigrant seniors program. But where else can the state even look to tighten the belt when we have, you know, obligations to continually increase spending in places like education? There's pensions, obviously. Then you have agencies like DCFS where there's been this consistent increase in funding to try to fix some of the problems that agencies had in the past. There's a lot of areas that are expecting, if not increases in funding, at least stable funding. Where do you see other potential places where the belt can be tightened?
Yeah, you know, there were, over the last few years, we've had a lot of pork projects that were Democrat-only pork projects that were in the budget. Some of those are continuing into this coming fiscal year. So certainly that would be a place where we could cut and say, look, we're not doing any more of this. We have an obligation to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves first, developmentally disabled, services for senior citizens, things of that sort. And then we have to obviously think about, you know, working class families. Unfortunately, the Democrats right now are talking about a $6 billion, more than $6 billion tax increase, which is absolutely insane. You know, as I said earlier, $15 billion more than 6 years ago, and now they want to add $6 billion. The people of Illinois just are tired.
You're referring to the list of proposals that were put out by the more progressive members of the Democratic Party,
Yes,
correct?
Absolutely.
Have you heard anything about whether that's actually getting some traction? Because there are some revenue proposals being floated out there, but that big of a list is not something that we haven't heard from the leaders. I had one of the lead budget negotiators in the House, Cam Buckner, on just a couple of weeks ago, and he said that they still do not want to raise taxes. That was still the goal for this negotiation. And going from that to $6 billion increases seems like a pretty hard pivot.
Absolutely, but you never know. You know, we've seen year after year after year, they stuff these things into the budget implementation bill last minute. It hasn't gone through the committee process. It hasn't gone through the normal process that every other piece of legislation goes through. Last minute, when the individuals and the majority of the people in the House specifically right now have not been through a tough budget. So we're seeing a time where they're used to being able to get almost anything they want, and now they're not. So they may be willing to raise taxes. And I just want to make sure that the people of Illinois are on their toes, paying attention, because these things happen pretty quick.
What do you think about every year Governor Pritzker has like a new project that he wants to get done? This year there was a really interesting one in which he wanted to essentially demolish, renovate old state sites that are decrepit, abandoned, and one of them is in your district. One of them takes up a big chunk of Jacksonville. Those programs would cost a pretty penny to clean up those sites and put them and get them ready for sale. Is that something, is the state in the position to do that project now, or is that something that maybe should cut down on the line items?
And that's one of those things when I look at, my priorities for budgeting, it's taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves and investing in future infrastructure and things of that sort. Right now, the state's paying an exorbitant amount to try to maintain these properties that they basically just walked away from. While Jacksonville is no longer in my district after the new remap,
I apologize.
The reality is there's sites like that sitting all over the state that the different departments have turned over to CMS. CMS is mowing them, but outside of that, not a whole lot is being done. And we all know the reality of projects and costs and cost overruns. It's not going to be cheaper in 5 years. So let's go ahead and get this done now. Move along, get it back on the property tax rolls for development.
You mentioned the proposals coming out of Washington conflicting with Illinois policies. We are seeing proposals in Congress that would lead to pretty big cuts in Medicaid across the board. And there's also other fears from state budgeteers about what kind of money is going to be coming from the federal government to different state agencies. So much so that they've talked about, House Speaker Chris Welch floated the idea of maybe having to come back later in the year to modify the budget based on what DC does, what Congress does. What are your thoughts on that idea when we still don't have that federal spending plan set in stone yet?
Yeah, and they don't pass a budget until probably August. So we'll see. But the reality is a lot of this is scare tactics. But we know that there's scare tactics from Democrats in the state of Illinois to blame federal government for the issues. But we know that the federal government is supposed to be in charge of immigration and homeland security and things of that sort. So the reality is the state of Illinois is denying the federal government the powers that we granted to them as a state. So we have to look at this and we have to say, the federal government's saying, we have an immigration policy. States like Illinois and California, you have to follow these policies for us to remain a safe country. So there's a legal process to go through. If you choose not to go through this process, you may lose Medicaid funding, right? So we know going into this that there's a possibility that we could lose Medicaid funding because of us providing free health care for illegal immigrants on the backs of Illinois taxpayers. So I think this is the time where we have to say, well, let's not worry about calling their bluff. We can't afford it right now. Let's get rid of the HBIA and HBIS programs right now, and we don't have to worry about that even being a possibility for the state of Illinois. And we don't have to put the concern on the backs of those who are provided health care through Medicaid.
I want to shift because you spoke a little bit this week about some of the energy grid problems that the state is facing. Just had Senator Cunningham on the show as well to talk about the Democratic proposals, what this energy omnibus bill could actually look like. The big thing that he's focused on is battery storage for the clean energy sources that have been built up in the past few years, and trying to make those clean energy sources more reliable for when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing, I guess. So from your perspective, though, what are your thoughts on the way that the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act has been proceeding, and knowing now with the advent of AI, increase in processing centers and data centers, the energy grid demands are just too high for what we have right now. What are your thoughts on where the state should go?
We have unfortunately, in the state of Illinois, we have a perfect storm that was created by legislation, right? We have generation going down because we're taking coal and we're not allowing natural gas to come online, which are the huge baseline providers of energy generation. And then we also have technology coming in that requires, like you said, an exorbitant amount of energy. So the reality is we have to have reliable energy. We have to have, everybody expects that when they walk into a room that they flip that light switch and it turns on. And so we have to continue to provide for that. The reality about battery storage, for instance, my concerns with that is we're trading one environmental issue for another. I don't know if you saw recently, they talked about a huge lithium deposit that they found out in Oregon. And the folks out in Oregon who tend to be a little bit more on the environmental side are saying, no, we don't want you to mine this. But it's okay when it comes from a third world country. It's just not okay when it happens right here in the state, or in the United States. So if it's bad for the environment in Oregon, it's probably bad for the environment in some third world country across the world. So, I just want to make sure that we're being very truthful with ourselves, because I care about the environment. I want my kids to grow up in a safe, clean environment. We're moving very fast, faster than we can to keep up with the generation needs. And I'm okay with trying new things along the way, but to believe that wind and solar are going to take the place of gas and coal is just not realistic.
Before even the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act passed, we did see some coal generation plants. It wasn't like that business was booming before we saw that pass. There were plants being decommissioned without the state deadlines already being put in place. Is that, and that rock is already going.
Yeah.
It's already snowballing. So what's the potential solution there? Or is it something completely alternative from both, and it's start building nuclear faster?
And there's some of that was agreements with the Obama administration back in the day about coal ash and how coal ash is dealt with at coal power plants. And I understand some of those closures were coming along already. But the reality is we're also saying that you can't turn these coal facilities into natural gas, which natural gas right now is the cheapest form of energy that we could produce. And if you add, my understanding in talking with people from the energy sector, they said, look, we can have a win-win by collecting methane, adding 15% into the natural gas, which would create a carbon neutral form of energy production, which would be amazing. And these are things that we could do. I mean, obviously we'd have to build the infrastructure, but if we start today, we'll have that cleaner form of energy being created right away, reliable. Natural gas can peak up and it can go down. It's one of the few that can actually do that. So I think we really need to look back and look at natural gas. We need to get away from the environmentalists saying gas is bad, okay, right? We need to say we can make it cleaner. We can do it better. And so if we focus on those things, we can have that clean baseline generation.
All right, well, Representative Davidsmeyer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back.